And our surrounding communities are on an accelerated path to ecological restoration. NOAA, which is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, has announced that they are recommending support for our effort entitled Community-Driven Restoration Priorities and Meaningful Engagement in the Scajaquada Creek watershed. We'll talk about what that actually means in a moment. It's with a $901,000 grant project over 3 years. We're one of only 150 projects across 30 states. So Waterkeeper would like to thank Congressman Higgins not only for his ongoing leadership in DC on all things Great Lakes and water, but for his support here locally for all the work that Waterkeeper has been doing for more than 30 years. It truly has been a tremendous partnership, and we've done a lot together. So it's great to continue this effort in Scajaquada Creek. Waterkeeper would also like to thank Senators Schumer and Gillibrand for their efforts in the Senate to also make sure that there's federal funding available for communities like ours who are doing this kind of work. Thank you to my colleagues at Waterkeeper, particularly Holly Noack, Sandy Smith, Wendy Patterson, all who were key players in helping coordinate this grant. And a special thank you to our community partners. Some of them are represented here today. We'd like to thank Black Rock Riverside Alliance, Grassroots Gardens, Buffalo Women in Environmental Leadership, and Friends of Broderick Park and the Buffalo United Front. And most importantly, we would like to thank our community for continuing to support and advocate for the restoration of Scajaquada Creek. Waterkeeper has really been pursuing restoration of this creek for a long time. And we are pursuing the same strategy for this creek system as we did for the Buffalo River. It is a foundation in healthy ecosystems and clean and accessible water for everybody. Scajaquada Creek watershed is only 29 square miles, but it does encompass the city of Buffalo, towns of Cheektowaga, Lancaster, and the village of Depew. The creek itself stretches about 13 miles, and significant portions of this 13 miles have been altered or impaired over the decades, including hardened shorelines, straightened channels, buried sections, polluted brownfields, and sewage overflows. And for generations, our community has avoided, or at least been unable to connect with this creek system due to the polluted water and the physical barriers like the 198 and the 3 miles of creek that are buried underground on the east side today. And despite being classified as one of the most polluted creeks in waterways in New York State, this creek is actually spring-fed, both in the headwaters in Lancaster and in sections of the city of Buffalo. And with a little help for humans, it has the ability to recover. It is not a dead waterway. It's just overwhelmed by generations of bad decisions that we can undo, and we can have a new path forward. So incremental progress has been made in restoring the creek corridor, including our wetland restoration and floodplain project at Forest Lawn Cemetery, various pathway connections, hazardous waste cleanups, and the start of sewer upgrades. And there's way more to come. So opportunities for accelerating this recovery are coalescing due to many factors, including the proposal for the 198 redesign, the planned improvements to the sewer system and surrounding neighborhoods, and ongoing pollution cleanup in various locations. We know that long-forgotten communities in this corridor have the potential to be transformed through reconnections to a restored creek system. And the efforts start with inclusive and diverse partnerships, perspectives, collaborative work, and coalition building. Community involvement in restoration planning and setting priorities isn't complicated. It just requires resources and commitments by people to make it happen. So what are we going to do? What is this going to accomplish? A key outcome of this project will result in a restoration roadmap for Scajaquada Creek, one that is built from the input and voices of the very members of the community who have been historically impacted the most. Several technical studies will be included in this effort in order to advance potential resiliency projects towards future construction, also improving connectivity between creeks and neighborhoods in the Black Rock Riverside areas, the east side, and Cheektowaga. It will also include proposed ecosystem restoration and a plan for the eventual removal of the unsightly Finger Dam trash rack behind me. All of these efforts will help elevate priority projects and actions for this corridor. It'll provide an advantage for our creek and our community to seek out and secure funding needed to construct the projects in the near future. This was exactly the approach and the steady strategic approach we used to restore the Buffalo River. And thanks to support from NOAA, we are now going to be able to do the same for Scajaquada Creek. So I'd like to introduce Congressman Higgins, who will share some thoughts.
Thank you, Jill. First of all, I want to thank Jill Jedlicka and Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper. They have not only a national reputation, a reputation that's very well known in Congress and in the administration, but an international reputation as well for doing extraordinary work as stewards of our waterways and leading the effort toward remediation, toward cleaning up. And this is just another example. 149 applicants were being funded this year nationally, and this project, under the direction of Jill Jedlicka and the Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper, is one of them. One of 6 projects in New York State as well. We have had a history, which Jill is very familiar with, of industrial pollution, of urban runoff that has compromised the quality of our natural resources, our waterways. And while this, compared with the larger Buffalo River and as part of the Niagara River Basin, seems like it's small, it's still very, very significant toward a full restoration of all of our waterways. The money, the $901,000 for this project, was part of the bipartisan infrastructure law and also the Inflation Reduction Act. But these monies are highly competitive, and that this project, under the direction of Buffalo Niagara Riverkeeper, is funded says a lot about the needs of this area, obviously, but also the great professional work of Jill Jedlicka and her entire team toward the goal of putting the applications together that are necessary to secure these funds. So we can answer any questions you may have about the specifics of this, but this is another good day. Anytime we're with the Buffalo Niagara Riverkeeper and Jill, it's always an announcement about more money coming from the federal government to Buffalo for a good purpose. I remember, and I'll just wrap it up here, when I was a young guy in the Buffalo City Council, the predecessor, twice removed from the Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper, was the Friends of the Buffalo River. And it was a fledgling 501c3 not-for-profit organization that had no money, and it was charged with the responsibility of developing a rap, not a song, but a remedial action plan to clean up the Buffalo River, which was ecologically destroyed, biologically compromised because of industrial runoff for a long time. Now there's a whole new generation of pollutants that find their way into our waterways that need to be addressed. But this organization became more professional, and it's evolved to the highly professional, nationally and internationally recognized, the Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper. So I want to thank Jill for her leadership on this issue, for her vision, for her hard work, and for the partnership that we've established toward the goal of cleaning up these waterways on behalf of our mutual constituents. So with that, we'll take any questions.
Sure. Much of this money is going to be returned back into the community. So a big portion of the grant is to provide capacity for local groups, in particular in underserved and underrepresented communities, for them to become involved in the restoration planning for their communities. We will also be doing some technical studies, so there will be consultants that are hired in the process to evaluate the potential restoration opportunities up and down this entire creek corridor. So it really is putting money back into the local economy. It's a 3-year project. So the first year will be a lot of some of the desktop analysis, the coalition building, the conversations that have to happen. A lot of the planning will happen in years 2 and 3.
How does that relate to cleaning up?
Right. You cannot clean up this creek unless you do what we're talking about doing. You need to do the planning, the visioning, you need the studies, you need the analysis, you need the information. If you don't have that, you cannot go after the larger funds that we need to actually put shovels in the ground and make change and restore the creek. It is. It's not the very beginning, because there's a lot that we're building off of already of some things that we've done over time. This is just filling in the gaps, the information gaps that we need in order to make this a reality. There may be projects that come out of this that will then be at the front line of requesting funding to put shovels in the ground. Right. Right. It means that we will have the information and the roadmap to actually do the restoration projects. This is the unsexy work of what we do. This is what it takes to restore a creek and restore the Buffalo River. If we don't do this now, the cleanup is never going to happen. It is a step that has to happen. It will create jobs for the consultants that we are going to be hiring, and it also is part of the restoration planning. It's also looking at how does a restored health of a creek system enable and improve the quality of life of other communities around it. Right, right, right. Yeah, right. Absolutely. Imagine it as parallel trains down a track. Cleaning up a river system is not a linear process. You don't wait for A to be done before you start B. And this is the Buffalo River model that we use. There's at least 5, 6, 7 different activities that can happen in different segments of this creek system that ultimately will all coalesce to result in a comprehensive cleanup. There is a lot happening in Cheektowaga, which is a great thing. A lot happening with the sewer authority. This is the stuff that isn't moving that we need to get moving.
Yeah. First of all, as Jill has made very clear, that this preliminary work is more important toward getting more federal money to do the actual cleanup, right? Um, so there's oversight as to how these monies are spent to ensure that they meet the objective. If they don't meet the objective, then the organization is compromised relative to future consideration. Waterkeeper has a stellar reputation locally, but nationally as well, and it has good street cred or water cred. And it will continue to get funding for these projects. So, Ron, 15 years ago, we had waterways that were part of areas of concern. You don't want to be on that list because they included dead zones, because of point source pollution. Buffalo color used to dump right into the Buffalo River. In about a 15-year period, we've removed about 62,000 semi-truckloads full of contaminated waste that had settled on the base of the Buffalo River. These waterways will be delisted with the infrastructure money that we have and other sources of funding within 5 years. Basically, releasing the restrictions that are currently placed on those waterways. It took a long time to do that, but living near a waterway that is healthy is much better and advantageous to a community than not. And we have taken a very, very aggressive approach, both in terms of congressional funding, the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, which calls for, that being the preliminary work before the actual removal of the contaminated sediment occurs. And, as I said, we had dead zones. Aquatic life could not survive in the Buffalo River and parts of the Niagara River. This Scajaquada Creek touches the city of Buffalo, Cheektowaga, Lancaster, and Depew. All of these communities deserve to live along a clean waterway. Yeah, yeah. Riverkeeper just doesn't say, give us the money and we'll see you next time. They have to apply for the money to inform the federal government of exactly what it is going to do with the money, either in full or in part. And then and only then is it approved. And after it's approved, there is another review to ensure that what was agreed to be done to this waterway was in fact done. So there is already a process in place to ensure proper congressional and administration oversight. Yeah, understood. And I assure you that as this community has disproportionately benefited from these cleanup dollars, which eventually lead to the cleanup of these waterways. It's indicative of the good reputation that we have for complying with the objectives of the program. And you don't get funded unless you have that reputation, unless you submit a clear and compelling application for those funds. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Our goal is to delist all of those sites that have been listed as areas of concern. And the reason they were listed as areas of concern because restrictions were placed on the use of those waterways because of the polluted nature of those waterways. The Buffalo River was set ablaze in the early 1970s. It helped to spark, along with the Cuyahoga River, the Earth Day and the federal government's response. The Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, all of those were a direct result of people from communities like this demanding that be done nationally. So I foresee a lot more money coming into this community to delist those sites, to remove the restrictions so we can realize the full potential in terms of life quality, in terms of a healthy community, of having clean waterways. Unfortunately, a lot of industry, which is no longer around, dumped their toxic chemicals directly into the river. And these studies are done to determine what is the best method by which you do that. They were looking at one point, with respect to the Buffalo River, to dredge it, to take the contaminated sediment out of the river, or to cap it, to separate the bottom sediment from the water column itself. I'm glad that the decision was made to remove the contaminated sediment. More money, longer period of time, but a better process as it relates to the community that should be the beneficiary of living along a waterway. You can't develop a waterfront on polluted water. And this is, as Jill said, it's not the most exciting aspect of it, but it's absolutely essential to doing it, but more importantly, doing it right.
And to your point about the upper watershed, there is a lot of preliminary work underway to advance that progress up there as well. It's just not newsworthy at this point. So we look at the whole system holistically.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great job.
Very much. Good job, you too.